Her smile lit up the room, then she said, "By alien law, I belong to you, asterisk. The morning that changed everything. David Martinez had always been a creature of habit. Coffee at 6:30, toast with strawberry jam, and the morning news while planning. Another ordinary day at the engineering firm. But this Tuesday morning shattered every routine he had ever known. The soft hum coming from his living room wasn't his ancient air conditioner. David crept toward the sound, coffee mug trembling in his hand. There, standing by his bookshelf like she belonged there, was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Her skin had a subtle silver shimmer, like moonlight on water, and her hair cascaded in waves of deep purple that seemed to move with its own gentle breeze. She turned toward him with a smile that could have powered the entire city. Her eyes were the color of amethyst, large and expressive, holding depths that spoke of distant worlds and ancient wisdom. She wore a flowing dress that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. "Good morning, David," she said in a voice like wind chimes mixed with honey. "I am Zephyra of the Celestial Courts. According to the Universal Bonding Protocols, I belong to you now." David's coffee mug hit the floor, shattering into pieces that scattered across his hardwood floors. The hot liquid splashed across his bare feet, but he barely noticed. His mind was trying to process what his eyes were seeing and what his ears were hearing. "I'm sorry, what?" he managed to stammer, backing against the doorframe for support. Zephyra tilted her head gracefully, her expression showing gentle patience, mixed with curiosity. "Your emotional signature was detected across 17 star systems 3 months ago. It was so pure, so uniquely human, that our council decided you needed a life companion. I volunteered for the assignment." "Assignment?" David's voice cracked like he was 13 again. She stepped closer, and he caught a scent like rain on summer flowers mixed with something indefinably cosmic. "You were calling out, David. Your loneliness echoed through dimensions. We couldn't ignore such a beautiful, sad song." David ran his hands through his messy brown hair, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Look, lady, I don't know what kind of elaborate prank this is, but aliens don't just show up in people's apartments claiming to be their wives." "Not wives," Zephyra corrected gently. "Bonded companions. It's much more profound than your human marriage concept. And I'm not an alien to you any more than you are to me. We're simply from different parts of the same universe." She moved toward his kitchen with fluid grace, as if she had lived there for years. "I studied your customs extensively before arriving. I know you prefer your coffee strong, your eggs scrambled, and your mornings quiet. I also know you talk to your plants when you think no one is listening, and you always leave your bedroom window open because you love the sound of rain." David followed her, mesmerized despite his confusion. "How do you know all that?" "Emotional. Resonance leaves traces," she explained, opening his refrigerator and examining its contents with scientific interest. "Your feelings, your habits, your deepest desires all create patterns that travel through space and time. You've been broadcasting your true self for years without knowing it." She pulled out eggs and began preparing breakfast with movements that were both alien and somehow perfectly natural. "I know you work too much because you're afraid of going home to emptiness. I know you help Mrs. Patterson next door with her groceries because kindness is as natural to you as breathing. I know you dream of adventure, but settle for safety." David leaned against the counter, watching this impossible woman make eggs in his kitchen while casually dismantling his entire understanding of reality. "So what happens now? You just move in, and we live happily ever after?" Zephyra smiled again, that radiant expression that made his heart skip beats he didn't know it could skip. "Now we begin the most beautiful experiment in the universe. We learn if love can truly bridge the gap between worlds, learning to share space and hearts." The first week with Zephyra was like living inside a beautiful disaster. David had spent 5 years perfecting his bachelor lifestyle, and suddenly every carefully organized corner of his existence was delightfully disrupted by someone who treated gravity as a suggestion and considered his microwave a primitive artifact. "David," she called from the bathroom on Wednesday morning, "why does your cleaning water only flow in one direction?" He found her staring at the shower with genuine scientific fascination, her silver blue hair floating around her shoulders as if she were underwater. She had discovered that Earth plumbing was far less sophisticated than whatever they used on her home world. "It's called gravity," he explained, trying not to stare at a bathroom light made her skin shiver. "Water falls down. That's pretty much how everything works here." How inefficient, she mused, then looked at him with those devastating amethyst eyes. On Shelastara, water dances in spirals that cleanse both body and spirit simultaneously. "Would you like me to show you?" Before he could answer, she gestured gracefully, and the shower water began swirling in impossible helixes, creating patterns that were somehow both calming and energizing. David watched in wonder as droplets suspended themselves in midair, forming temporary sculptures of liquid light. "That's incredible," he breathed. "Everything is incredible when you pay attention," she replied softly. "Humans rush through their daily rituals without seeing the magic in them. But you, David, you notice things. That's why your signal was so clear across the cosmos." Their domestic life developed its own strange rhythm. Zephyra would attempt Earth customs with endearing determination, while David found himself seeing his own world through her curious eyes. She made breakfast by singing to the ingredients, coaxing flavors he had never imagined from simple eggs and toast. She organized his bookshelf by emotional resonance rather than alphabetical order, creating combinations that somehow made perfect sense. "Your neighbor is watching us again," Zephyra observed one afternoon as they sat on his small balcony. Mrs. Chun from apartment 3B had taken to lingering in the hallway whenever Zephyra was around. "She's just curious," David said. "You're not exactly typical girlfriend material." "Girlfriend?" Zephyra repeated the word carefully, as if tasting it. "Is that what I am to you?" David felt heat creep up his neck. They hadn't really defined their relationship beyond the mystical bonding protocol she had mentioned. "I don't know what you are," he admitted. "I just know that everything feels different since you arrived. Better, like I was living in black and white before, and now everything has color." Zephyr reached over and took his hand. Her touch was warm and sent little electric currents up his arm. "On Shelastara, we have a saying. Love is not about finding someone to complete you, but finding someone who inspires you to complete yourself." That evening, David found himself sharing things he had never told anyone. He talked about his parents' divorce when he was 12, how it had made him afraid of commitment. He told her about his dreams of traveling, of designing bridges that would connect not just places but hearts. He shared his secret fear that he was too ordinary for anything extraordinary to ever happen to him. Zephyra listened with the kind of attention that made him feel like he was the only person in the universe. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "David," she said finally, "do you know what made your emotional signature so unique that it traveled across 17 star systems?" He shook his head. "It wasn't sadness or loneliness, though. Those were present. It was hope. Pure, unshakable hope that somewhere in the vast universe there was someone meant for you. That hope was so powerful, so beautiful, that our most sensitive empaths felt it like a beacon." She moved closer to him on the couch, her eyes reflecting the soft lamplight. "You called to me across impossible distances with nothing but the strength of your believing heart. How could you ever think you're ordinary?" That night, as David lay in bed listening to Zephyra humming soft melodies in the guest room, he realized that everything he thought he knew about love, about life, about the very nature of reality was changing. And for the first time in years, He wasn't afraid of change. When worlds collide, the first real test of their unusual relationship came when David's sister Emma decided to surprise visit. David had been dreading this moment since Zephyr arrived, knowing that explaining his new living situation would require either creative lies or impossible truths. "David, I brought wine and gossip," Emma called out as she used her spare key, bursting through the front door with characteristic energy. She froze mid-step when she saw Zephyr gracefully watering David's plants with what appeared to be liquid, starlight streaming from her fingertips. David?" Emma's voice was carefully controlled. "Who is the incredibly gorgeous woman making your philodendron glow?" Zephyr turned with her luminous smile, seemingly unbothered by the fact that she had just been caught performing botanical miracles. "You must be Emma. David speaks of you constantly. I am Zephyra, his bonded companion." Emma looked between them, her lawyer instincts clearly trying to process this information. Bonded companion. Right. And the glowing plant thing? "Your brother's flora were suffering from emotional neglect," Zephyr explained matter-of-factly. "I was simply sharing some life energy with them." David stepped forward, putting himself between his sister's analytical stare and Zephyr's otherworldly calm. "Emma, this is going to sound crazy, but Zephyr is from another planet. She came here because of some kind of universal matchmaking protocol." "Another planet," Emma repeated slowly. "The third moon of Celestara, to be precise," Zephyr added helpfully. "It's in what you call the Andromeda Galaxy." Emma sat down heavily on David's couch, still clutching her bottle of wine. "Okay, let's say I believe this completely insane story." "Why my brother?" "No offense, David, but you're an engineer from Portland who collects vintage postcards and has never been on a date that lasted more than 3 months." "None taken," David muttered, though it stung a little. Zephyr moved to sit beside Emma with fluid grace. "May I show you something?" Before Emma could answer, Zephyr placed her hand gently on Emma's forehead. Suddenly, the room filled with soft, ethereal music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Images began floating in the air around them. David as a child, building elaborate structures with blocks while humming contentedly. David at 16, staying up all night to help a classmate with a science project. David at 25, quietly, paying Mrs. Patterson's electric bill when she was struggling financially. "Your brother has one of the purest hearts I have ever encountered," Zephyr said softly as the images faded. "His capacity for love, for kindness, for hope creates ripples across dimensions. He doesn't see his own light, but others do. We do." Emma stared at her brother with new eyes, tears forming. "David, I had no idea you paid for Mrs. Patterson's electricity." David shifted uncomfortably. "She's 87 and living on Social Security." "It wasn't a big deal." "It was to her," Zephyr said. "And it was to the universe. Every act of selfless love sends out energy waves. Your brother has been broadcasting love for years without realizing it." Emma wiped her eyes and looked at Zephyr with growing acceptance. "So you traveled across galaxies because my brother is a good guy?" "I traveled across galaxies because your brother is a beacon of hope in a universe that desperately needs more hope," Zephyr corrected. "And because when I heard his heart calling, mine answered." Over dinner, Emma peppered Zephyr with questions about her home world, interstellar travel, and alien customs. Zephyr answered everything with patient detail, describing crystal cities that sang with the wind and creatures that painted auroras across night skies for pure joy. "What's the hardest thing about being on Earth?" Emma asked. Zephyr considered this carefully. "Learning to contain my emotions. On Celestara, feelings are meant to be shared, to flow freely between people. Here, David works so hard to hide his feelings, to appear strong and independent." It's heartbreaking to watch someone dim their own light out of fear. David felt something shift inside his chest. I'm not hiding my feelings, he protested. When did you last tell someone you loved? Them? Zephyra asked, gently. The question hung in the air. David realized he couldn't remember. Not since his grandmother died 3 years ago. Emma reached over and squeezed his hand. We love you, you know. You don't have to earn it or prove you deserve it. You just have to accept it. That night, after Emma left with promises to return, soon and threats to hurt anyone who hurt her brother, David found Zephyra on the balcony, looking up at the stars with an expression of longing. Do you miss home? He asked. I miss the certainty, she admitted. On Celestara, love is simple, pure. Here, everything is complicated by fear and past hurt and social expectations. David moved to stand beside her. Do you regret coming? She turned to face him, her amethyst eyes reflecting the city lights. Never. But David, I need you to understand something. I can't make you love me. I can't force a bond that you don't want. The universe brought us together, but what we do with that gift is entirely up to us. The choice between fear and forever. David's world tilted on its axis the morning he woke up to find Zephyra's belongings slowly dissolving into particles of light. She sat cross-legged on his living room floor, her eyes closed in meditation, while her few possessions from Celestara began to fade like morning mist. What's happening? He asked, panic creeping into his voice. Zephyra opened her eyes, and he saw sadness there that made his chest tight. The bonding window is closing, David. I have to return home in 3 days, or I'll be stranded here permanently. Stranded? The word came out sharper than he intended. Is that what this would be to you? Being stuck with me? She stood with her usual grace, but there was something different about her movements, something more fragile. David, you don't understand. My people can't survive indefinitely away from our energy sources. If I stay beyond the harmonic convergence, I'll slowly fade away. I'll become human, but a human who can never fully belong to either world. David felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. So what are you saying? That this was always temporary? That you were always going to leave? I was hoping. She started, then stopped. Her silver skin seemed dimmer somehow, less luminous. I was hoping you would choose to come with me. The words hit him like a physical blow. Come with you? To another galaxy? The bonding protocol works both ways, David. If you accept the bond completely, if you choose me as I have chosen you, the universe will transform you. You could survive on Celestara. We could build a life together among the singing crystals and the dancing lights. David sank onto his couch, his mind reeling. You're asking me to leave everything. My job, my sister, my entire world. I'm asking you to trust that some things are worth leaving everything behind for, Zephyra said softly. But I won't ask you to make that choice lightly. The next 3 days passed in a blur of impossible decisions and sleepless nights. David called in sick to work, something he had never done without actually being ill. He and Zephyra spent their time walking through the city, talking about everything and nothing, while the weight of the approaching deadline pressed down on them both. She showed him wonders he had never noticed before. In Pioneer Square, she taught him to see the love stories written in the wear patterns on old benches. At the food trucks, she helped him taste the emotions that different cooks poured into their recipes. In Powell's books, she showed him how certain books glowed with the residual joy of readers who had found exactly what they needed. Your world is full of magic, she told him as they sat by the Willamette River, watching the sunset paint the water gold. Humans just don't know how to see it anymore. Will you miss it? He asked. If I choose to come with you? I'll miss the surprises, she admitted. On Celestara, We know each other so well that true surprise is rare. Here, every conversation can reveal something unexpected. Even you, David, after all my study of your emotional patterns, you still manage to amaze me. How? She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. Yesterday, when that child dropped her ice cream, you bought her a new one without even thinking about it. When I mentioned being cold, you gave me your jacket before I finished the sentence. You love so instinctively, so purely, that it takes my breath away. That evening, Emma came over for dinner, bringing wine and forced cheerfulness that couldn't quite hide her worry. She had spent the last 3 days researching everything she could about interstellar law, as if she could find a legal loophole in universal bonding protocols. There has to be another option, Emma insisted as they sat around David's small dining table. Some kind of long-distance relationship solution. Cosmic video calls. Something. Zephyra shook her head gently. The universe doesn't work that way, Emma. Love requires presence, commitment, choice. It asks us to be brave enough to leap without, knowing exactly where we'll land. Emma turned to her brother, her eyes fierce with protective love. David, I need you to know that whatever you choose, I'll support you. But I also need you to be sure, really, truly sure. That night, David lay, awake staring at the ceiling, while Zephyra hummed soft melodies in the guest room. Tomorrow, she would begin the journey home, with or without him. The thought of never seeing her again made something inside him shrivel up and die. But the thought of leaving Earth, leaving Emma, leaving everything he had ever known, terrified him just as much. At dawn, he found Zephyra on the balcony, her belongings now almost completely transparent. She was more beautiful than ever, but there was something ethereal about her now, as if she was already partly gone. I have to ask you something, David said, his voice hoarse from the sleepless night. If I come with you, if I become whatever I need to become to survive on Celestara, will I still be me? Zephyra turned to face him, her amethyst eyes bright with unshed tears. You'll be more yourself than you've ever been, David. The transformation doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you are always meant to be. Love's cosmic leap, the final hour, arrived like a countdown to the end of the world. David stood in his living room, watching Zephyra prepare for departure with movements that were graceful even in their finality. Her few remaining possessions had become translucent, and she herself seemed to shimmer between solid and spirit. The portal will open at sunset, she said quietly, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. If you're going to choose, David, it has to be now. Emma sat on the couch, clutching David's hand like she could anchor him to earth through sheer will. She had been crying on and off all day, though she tried to hide it. Mrs. Patterson had stopped by earlier with cookies and awkward questions about Zephyra's unusual appearance, somehow sensing that something momentous was happening in apartment 4A. I keep thinking about what you said, David told Zephyra, his voice barely above a whisper, about how I've been broadcasting hope across the universe without knowing it. You have, she confirmed, moving closer. Your heart has been calling, out for connection, for purpose, for a love that transcends the ordinary. That's what brought me to you. David looked around his apartment, at all the familiar objects that had defined his careful, quiet life. The vintage postcards he collected, the engineering textbooks, the plants that were now glowing softly with whatever energy Zephyra had shared with them. This had been his sanctuary, his safe space, but he realized now it had also been his prison. I've been afraid my whole life, he said suddenly. Afraid of being hurt like my parents hurt each other. Afraid of taking risks that might lead to failure. Afraid of wanting something so much that losing it would destroy me. Emma squeezed his hand. Being afraid doesn't make you weak, David. It makes you human. But it's kept me from really living, he continued, looking at Zephyra with growing clarity. I've spent 30 years playing it safe, and what do I have to show for it? A job that pays the bills, an apartment that's neat and quiet, and a heart that's been slowly starving because I was too scared to feed it. Zephyra approached him slowly, as if he were a wild creature that might bolt. Love is always a risk. David, whether it's human love or cosmic love, it requires courage. It asks us to choose trust over fear, connection over safety, growth over stagnation. The light in the room began to change, taking on a golden quality that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Through the window, David could see impossible. Colors painting the sky, as if the aurora borealis had decided to visit Portland. The portal is beginning to form, Zephyra said, her voice filled with regret and resignation. I have to go. David felt something break open inside his chest, a dam of fear and caution that had held back a lifetime of suppressed longing. What if I'm not brave enough for this? What if I can't be the person you think I am? Zephyra cupped his face in. Her hands, her touch warm and electric and infinitely gentle. David, you've already been that person. Every act of kindness, every moment of hope, every time you chose love over fear, you are preparing for this moment. The universe doesn't make mistakes about matters of the heart. Emma stood up, tears streaming down her face. David, look at me. He turned to his sister, seeing her clearly perhaps for the first time. She was beautiful and strong and fierce, and she loved him unconditionally. I've watched you your whole life, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I've watched you dim your own light because you were afraid it was too much, too bright, too overwhelming. But David, your light is exactly what this world needs. If that light can shine brighter, somewhere else, with someone who sees it and celebrates it and helps it grow, then you have to go. Emma, I can't leave you. You're not leaving me, she said firmly. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. And knowing that my brother is out there somewhere, loving and being loved across the stars, will make every day brighter. The apartment filled with music that seemed to come from the cosmos itself, harmonies that spoke of distant worlds and infinite possibilities. Through the window, a column of light began to descend from the sky, swirling with colors that had no names in any earth language. It's time, Zephyra whispered. David looked one last time at his sister, memorizing her face, her strength, her unwavering love. Then he turned to Zephyra, this impossible woman who had traveled across galaxies to find him, and made the choice that would change everything. I choose you, he said, his voice strong and clear. I choose love. I choose the adventure. I choose to trust that the universe knows what it's doing. Zephyra's smile was radiant enough to power solar systems. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, David replied, and realized it was true. The fear was still there, but it was overwhelmed by something much stronger. The absolute certainty that this was his moment, his chance to step into the extraordinary life he had always dreamed of but never dared to reach for. As they moved toward the column of light, Emma called out, David. He turned back one more time. Love each other well, she said, and remember that home isn't a place. It's wherever your heart is completely known and completely accepted. David nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his throat. Then he took Zephyra's hand, stepped into the cosmic light, and felt himself transform. Not into something alien, but into everything he had always been, but had been too afraid to become. The last thing he heard as they ascended was Emma calling out, I love you, brother. Make the universe proud. And as Earth fell away below them, and the stars welcomed them home, David knew with absolute certainty that some choices change everything, and some loves are worth crossing galaxies to find. His heart, which had called out across 17 star systems, had finally found its answer in the smile of a woman who had traveled impossible distances just to say, "By alien law, I belong to you." But the truth was simpler and more beautiful than any law. They belonged to each other by choice, by love, by the cosmic certainty that some souls are meant to find each other no matter how far apart they start.